Welcome to Sound Mind International. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind.
Hello, and welcome to part 2 of thought patterns in terms of dealing with depression. In this topic, we're going to be focusing on narcissism. Now, what is narcissism? For most of you who do not know, it is a type of personality disorder. It can be very destructive, but little is spoken about the influence it could have on your way of thinking or thought patterns. So stay tuned as we discuss a more topic, and I hope that this course will equip you with the resources, with the tools, or the tactics that will truly help you in whatever circumstances you might find yourself in to take effective control. Narcissism, as I mentioned, it's a personality disorder. It affects the victim's thinking pattern. The abuse interrupts your logical reasoning, which could cause trauma. As I mentioned in the other course of healing from past and trauma. Trauma was the main subject of discussion. Most people, this could be trauma caused from childhood, oftentimes with people who have had narcissistic parents. As a result, now this could cause major trust issues. I'm not just talking about, the little lies here and there people tell in friendships or relationships. I'm talking about this could cause major, sincere, and very logical trust issues, and it could take years of recovery from this type of mental abuse, years of therapy, years of personal hard work of wanting to heal and and to trust again, because oftentimes you don't want to end up transferring those trust issues onto somebody else and having them pay for mistakes or personal mental abuses that they did not inflict upon you. Experience with narcissism. Oftentimes, you can easily identify symptoms of somebody who has suffered from narcissistic abuse. This could range from passiveness, complacentness, being submissive in personality, and oftentimes this has become a result of them just adapting this sort of personality and confirming to things as a way of survival. So this is a survival tactic or technique that they have adapted to either mentally survive, and as well it leaves you questioning your own sanity. If you find yourself questioning the reality of things, and oftentimes something is as easy as it's either black, it's either white, but then with victims who have suffered from narcissistic abuse, they find themselves, trying to irrationalize thoughts or always think beyond that or always try and read into meanings, and you find yourself questioning so many things that they end up consuming your time, your energy, and you just end up feeling mentally, emotionally exhausted. This could also result in having low self-esteem, because oftentimes you'd find themselves as like becoming people pleasers. You always want to please, go above and beyond. By all means, I do encourage that. If somebody compels you to go 1 mile, go the extra mile with them. But oftentimes when you find yourself being a people pleaser, it's like you're always doing something wrong. It's like there's nothing that you do seems right to this individual. And oftentimes it's you either escape from narcissistic abuse or you end up confirming to this individual's personality type. Now, oftentimes this could be a result. I know you could be asking me, well, how do I know I suffered, narcissistic abuse? How do I know if, right now, if I could be dealing with a narcissist, or how do I look out so I don't fall victim to narcissistic abuse? So maybe you could be watching this and you could be asking like, oh, maybe I fall into that category. Maybe you could be displaying traits of narcissism. This comes in the form of gaslighting. Oftentimes, as we know this is making an individual to question their reality or their sanity. For example, you could be hearing telephone conversation, you hear background noise, you hear music, you ask the person like, oh, what is that I hear in the noise? I hear music, I hear like a loud shout, I hear cars passing by, are you out on the street? And they could respond with something like, oh, I don't hear anything. That's not what I said. I don't know what would make you say things like that. And as well as demeaning your communication strategies, if you confront them, as I mentioned, you're not reacting, but you are responding to their behavior, their words, or their actions, and portraying and putting forth your needs and your wants. Because as human beings, we have the basic needs that are a necessity. Your mental health should be being a priority of them, they often try and demean you. That is because you could be supplying them, as I mentioned here, you could be supplying or feeding them with a particular need or want that they want. Because oftentimes with narcissists, they do not perceive you or their victims as an individual or human at all. They did not even perceive them as human. They perceive them as something, as a supply. You know, when you go to the supermarket, I'm going there to get supplies of goods or foods or whatever I need. If I go to the petrol station, I'm just there to get supply for my petrol, or fuel that I need. So this is the mentality that they perceive their victims with. So it could be, you need to sit down and identify what you're supplying this particular individual with, or what they're feeding off of you. It could be money, it could be your body, it could be, sexual activity, it could even be attention, it could even be the most oddest and weirdest possible reasons to be supplying somebody with. So you need to identify what it is you're supplying them with. And the often thing that you don't want to do, you don't want to come and confront the narcissist that and label them as they are. We're being very honest, we're being very transparent. If I see your dog, I'm not gonna call it a cat. If I see a snake, I'm not gonna call it any other thing than the fitting label. So oftentimes the mistake that most people do is addressing them that this is what they are. What that is going to do is just going to make them change the pattern and their behavior. And they're often going to come up with a sad background story and use it for pity or as a form of excuse to avoid being held accountable for their behavior and actions. So influence on your thought pattern. As I mentioned, this can make you question your own reality and sanity of things, as I gave the example of the telephone conversation, as well as make you question your own instinct. Now, this could have possibly consequential, results, because this could make an individual become hesitant to point out or take effective action, especially when after COVID-19, I'm sure a lot of people had to sit down, readjust their life, and make decisions that need you need to be quick and you need to be effective, and how you're going to make decisions. You can't just afford to literally, there was no time to sit around and decide, and play around with your life or play around with whatever it is that you needed to do. So you need to be quick and effective when it comes to taking actions. So as a result of narcissistic abuse, this could affect you. And avoiding confrontation, irrational thinking, you're always thinking, as I mentioned, what more is it that you could do? You always feel like you're not ever good enough, like you're never ever going to be able to attain a certain level with this person, because remember, they do not see you as human, they just see you as a supply, and they're going to keep draining and draining and draining you out till there's nothing else to drain. And they're going to leave you with that mentality of thinking that less is better than nothing. Now back to you. Oftentimes your sanity is really important. To take control of the circumstances of life and depression, you need sanity. You need mental strength. And oftentimes, as I mentioned, going back and forth with a narcissist, it can be emotionally, physically, and mentally draining. They often use aggression as a weapon to impose fear, and as well as to destabilize you and condition your mind to know your place. As I mentioned, if you confront them and you're responding with effective communication to them, this is how I feel, I don't like how you've been doing this, I don't like your behavior with this because it makes me feel like A, B, C, and D. Now, oftentimes they would try and, as I mentioned before, belittle that. It's as if, your feelings don't matter. It's as if it's like, how dare you? In fact, oftentimes the response that you might get from such an individual after calmly pointing out and explaining certain things is again, as I mentioned, aggression. Number 2 is how dare you? It's as if you should continue to know your place and stay there and continue to be an emotional, a sexual, or a mental punching bag for them. It's as if you don't deserve better. It's as if, little is better than nothing. And as a result, after confrontation, they might decide to go no contact. Oftentimes, they might do that to try and teach you a lesson. But honestly, if you have affirmed yourself, honestly, if you have high self-esteem, honestly, if you know who you are, they're doing you more good and a favor than hurt. So, and as well as the cobweb of life, they will leave you playing the role of inspector. And as I mentioned before, in COVID, you know, anybody got time for that, to be playing inspector roles. And as well as after them going no contact, they come back with the fake apologies and I miss you. Now, this again, they're feeding off of your emotions and they tend to have selective memory. It's like when you get a test, the results you get this is what went well, this is what needs improvement, or this is what you did wrong, and this is where you need to improve. So they will often pick points in the past the decent memories that you had with them and come back and combine it into what will not appear like an apology, but it's just like a plea. It's a plea. I call them breadcrumbs to kind of keep you there as a possible supply. It's to keep the door or the gateway open. It's like as if they don't want to completely burn up the bridge. Oftentimes when they go no contact, within that period of time, they could have possibly identified another supply, or maybe wanted to go off and start another life, but when that didn't work out, they don't want to completely burn that bridge and rule you off completely as a supply. And when somebody is feeding your emotions, but they're not feeding you mentally, they're not feeding your soul, they're not feeding your mental stability, and I'm telling you, you don't want to end up, years of therapy because of, narcissistic abuse. So if you're in this, you could be married to this person, you could be, I don't know the circumstances that are in your life, but I encourage you to guard your mind and keep your sanity. You need to weigh the options. When we talked about emotional versus logical thinking, logically, is my sanity really worth this relationship or whatever it is that you might be in? So as I mentioned, note the patterns and note the behavior. Note those I miss you, and you need to identify once you cut off that supply and they went no contact, what came after that? Or how was their response after you projecting your needs and your wants? What was the response? Was it that how dare you, how dare you think more or demand a humanistic response from me? Because remember, they don't see you as a human being. So you need to write down and reflect on those patterns and those behaviors. Future application, you need to run but silently. You do not announce to them, this is who you are, these are the characteristics you're displaying, so run quietly. Communication strategies. This is going to have to be closed questions, yes or no. If you open the gateway to what could seem like a back and forth confrontation, you need to learn how to quickly end that quickly. And if this results in them being angry because you cut it again, you're cutting off that supply. You're not feeding their ego. You're not feeding their emotions. You're not feeding their narcissistic behavior. You're cutting off the supply. And oftentimes what worked for me, it might not work for you. This is not a one size fits all. It's like you need to address this person as their personality. They're still a human being. They're not a problem, but they have a problem. So you need to address them as the problem that they have. You cannot see this individual as a human being. Now that is what worked for me, and you need to, any decisions or in your interactions with such an individual, you have to understand that they also do not see you as a human being, but as a form of a supply. So go no contact unless necessary. Only communicate when it's necessary. Affirm yourself and rebuke the fear, because remember, they're going to try, go that no contact as a form of punishment or shout or just display unnecessary childish aggressive behavior and expect you to be the peacemaker. So as I said, just let them throw the tantrums, let them be aggressive, so long as it's not directed towards you, so long as they're not hitting you and physically abusing you. So avoid that back and forth communication, identify that supply and cut it off immediately. Do not give them the time of day. If it's communication, yes, no, this is what needs to get done, end of conversation. And you need to set strategies down in place and hold somebody and make them know that there are consequences of behavior. There are consequences of the things that they say and do. You can allow somebody back into your life after doing certain things or saying certain things, affecting you mentally, emotionally, negative, and coming back and pinpoint with selective memory and only pinpointing the things that they possibly do here and there. They sort of like, to sweep it under the carpet. You need to clean that up. You need to clean the mess before you can put, a carpet over. It's like putting a veil over something, over a dirty table, and then expecting everything to be okay. So over to you. I want to thank you very much for listening to this audio. Please go back and recap on this video and part 1. Note the patterns, know their behaviors, and the different strategies that they use, and trust your instincts. Cut off the supply, run silently, and put in strategies in your place of yes and no's, and stay consistent to that and cut off that dependency. And I hope to see you over in part 3.